I'm a criminologist as much as I'm a sociologist and an anthropologist. That means I actually I do empirical research, I do field work, and from this field work I took some of the results or material that I think about and that are the basis of my intellectual thinking and my thinking about surveillance. And I will speak of some of this research today. Dietmar mentioned yesterday some of the CCTV research that I was doing, but there will be some other research I will be talking of today. In general, I thought to be talking of what are the general discourses when speaking about surveillance. And we heard about two of them yesterday. And I'm trying, what I want to do is to reflect about on these two discourses and offer yet another perspective which I feel is lacking. And because the two discourses I'll be talking about, who I feel are the dominant ones, do not cover surveillance as much. And they are actually not really talking about surveillance in a theoretical way. They use surveillance, and surveillance has a link to it, but it's not about surveillance. One of the dominant discourses that surveillance is talked about is data protection, and we heard lots about data protection yesterday. Data protection and big data as a phenomenon, well, more or less recent phenomenon, maybe 10 years or something. The massive analysis of data due to to social networks, to computer powers, to an information economy that has quadrupled or whatever. So data protection and big data are the current, or is one of the dominant themes when talked about surveillance. But what does it actually have to do with surveillance? Well, not very little, but little, because data protection is about something else. It's not primarily about surveillance. It's about definitions of what your data is, or the data that relates to you. It is about the rights you have. It is about procedures, legal procedures, which we'll be hearing about. But it has become synonymous for surveillance and data, and in a way that is scandalizing actually data. So it's I've had discussions or conversations where you just mention the word data and everybody goes, no data, I'm against surveillance. Well, we live in a bureaucratic society and data is all we have. Data makes us. When you get issued a passport, you become a person, so to speak. The entry in the database of the state makes you a person. If you want to know what it is to live without a passport and without this entry, you have to come to Germany and look at the refugees that are coming and do not have papers. They are no persons. They are there in flesh and blood, but they are not, they're not registered anywhere. So they are no person. There's no means of identification. There's identity, but there's no means of identification. There's no person. So there's, you have a registry entry, then you become someone. So that's about, this is what data is about. And the second big one we heard about yesterday as well is about privacy. Privacy is that the opposite of surveillance? Privacy protects you of surveillance, or does it have to do with it? I have a colleague, a Swiss sociologist called Sami Koll, who says privacy is the ally of surveillance. So it's not the flip side of the coin. And we heard a lot about privacy protection. What privacy is privacy a balance of things, like Gandhi seems to have it, as we heard yesterday, or is it something very confined to yourself and a very personal decision what privacy is? And this morning, I very early, about 7:30, I walked in Midtown Manhattan towards the Central Park, and I passed one of the buildings a bit away from the street in a cornered off through the architecture of the building was a homeless person. Couldn't see, it was just a human being, sheltered behind a big suitcase. The big suitcase was in front of him, so between him, her, the person and the rest of the pavement. And I thought, you know, maybe we're always talking about privacy when having the luxury of a refuge, having the, you know, when our privacy is not really threatened to the core. It is threatened because someone is listening in to our emails or whatever. But what about privacy with those people who have nothing left? Do they have a sense of privacy? Do they actually, if we would work with them, do they actually have something to say about privacy? You know, the suitcase could mean many things. I had the feeling there is someone who's trying to reserve a certain amount of privacy to him or herself. That would make a good piece of research if you think about research in government terms. You know, you go to those people who have virtually nothing to lose and then talk about privacy to get to the core of what it may be. But it's not about surveillance, because privacy is about a relation between you and the world, between you and other people, between you and someone wanted to know about things. It defines you as a person and what you yourself think you should have as a person. And then, of course, there's surveillance as repression as a dominant discourse, panopticism, yeah? The panoptic sort, so to speak, the NSA, the big brother, the overarching agent that snoops on all our lives. A very dark, 1984 led discourse. And I'm trying to get a grip on how this could be framed theoretically, because it is very often discussed in a very scandalizing way, you know, and for very good reasons, in a way that activists are looking at it. You know, my data, get off me, no snooping. You know, the obscenity about the NSA measures to gather all that data that they have. But what do you do about theoretical with it? What is surveillance actually? Is it someone looking at someone else? Is it just the big data collection is already surveillance? Is it the use? Is it the meaning that is derived from the data, the way that it's derived? Speaking to David Lyon yesterday, he said, well, he felt there was an absence yesterday about the discriminatory aspects of surveillance. This is his argument. It's about social sorting. And he says that surveillance is actually grouping populations into various small groups, and the one come to that sunny side of the road and the other come to that, you know, not so sunny side. Maybe have to sleep behind a suitcase. So there's the sorting way, the discriminatory aspect. But what actually does that mean? Because all of these discourses have consequences, of course, on how you view things. If you talk about data protection, there's a certain legal aspect of looking at things. Privacy maybe has legal aspects, but also philosophical aspects, as we heard yesterday. If you talk about the panopticism, maybe the penal state, something that came up yesterday very shortly, you know, the snooping state, maybe the Stasi or whatever, something the NSA has been compared to. And the question remains, and it was posed yesterday but never answered. Why is it that so many people give up their data, whatever that means, whatever that is, in return for nothing, in return for their own surveillance? And I will now try to offer at least a bit of an answer, and from there trying to explain what theoretical frame surveillance could be. And now I'm talking about research I did on a very banal theme, that is loyalty cards. You know, these little cards you use for shopping. Actually, very brief, shopping is a very social activity. It's not just going and spending money for goods, but it's much more. It's consumption, it's consumerism, it's you become another person by buying things. So that's what consumer society is in a way, using Zygmunt Bauman's terms, you know, you identify with a certain brand or thing, and that actually is something you want to be, and you express who you are with that. So consumer society is also about expression, buying for expression. That means that it's not about the commodity, it's about the symbol, what this commodity symbolizes. So shopping is a very social action, and loyalty cards actually, people, and I heard that from many interviews I did, people are engaging in an exchange. And when people engage in an exchange, it clearly is a social action. There are social relations negotiated, maintained. And there's one theory that could be used to actually play around with this theme of exchange, and that's Marcel Mauss' The Gift. Theory about the gift, written in, I think, 1927 or something, so very old. But the theory in short is about the gift exchange, which is different from merchant exchange, from commerce. You know, money, commodities are exchanged. And gift exchange is also about social relations. Everybody knows that. Those of you who have ever not accepted a gift, there are reasons for that, and these are social, not because you didn't like the gift, but because you didn't like the person you were getting it from. Or you felt that if you take it, there are obligations that you do not want to have, okay? So gifts are about obligations. So why do people trade the data? They don't trade the data. They are made, or they are put in a position where they actually engage in social relations. That's what they do in Facebook, for instance. People do not go on Facebook to give Mark Zuckerberg the data in return for, I don't know what, you know, a more or less nice-looking website and all the rest. They go on Facebook for their friends, so they engage in social actions, in social interactions. And that's the platform Mark Zuckerberg provides for them. I'm not sure if he knew about, you know, the in-depth, and if he had a plan, you know, gets people to do social actions, and I scrap off their data while doing it. But intuitively, he might have felt that this is something people want to do. As the British anthropologist Daniel Miller says, people are social networks. That's why they do it on Facebook, because that's what they do anyway. They social network. So, and the same with loyalty cards. And you know, loyalty cards scrap off the data about your shopping habits and everything else, and they don't give you anything. Well, and they're always warned, you know, these loyalty cards are not worth the effort. That you don't get anything off it, but they take the data, which is much more valuable. The people don't care really, because they don't think about the data protection. They don't think about data. They think about shopping. They think about the loved ones. They think about the exchange. They think about the obligations they might have to a shop. They think about the relation they have to a shop, the affection they have to a shop, all in the framework of a consumer society, of consumerism. Okay? And that's why it works. So surveillance, well, this is the second step. Surveillance and the data collection and what you could call surveillance or data gathering just attaches to all of these practices. Okay? This means that surveillance in itself is a practice, always is. You know, surveillance is nothing in itself. You know, it's not something in the air, you know, just flying around. Surveillance actually, it happens somewhere. There's always an interface where surveillance happens. And it is manifested and, you know, manifested in practices. Okay? And one of these practices is data gathering. Which then means that surveillance is basically, and that's what I would see it, and that's how I try to frame it theoretically, about the social relation. Okay, there's always a social relation. You know, somebody is watching, collecting, whatever. Yeah, take watching now for the thing that is done, and someone is watched, a surveiller, and someone being surveyed. So there is a social relation established. And if we think about the social relations or surveillance as a social relation, we can actually see and not rationalize, see and research on power relations, because power is nothing per se, but power is also a relation. Someone has power, someone has not power, someone makes someone do something, and someone is being done to make something to do, you know. So there might be asymmetries, there might be hierarchies, but there's always a relation. And seeing surveillance as part of social relations or manifested in social relations helps to understand why it can attach to so many other practices that people do, routines, frameworks of meanings, such as shopping or else. And I think that a discourse that would focus on the practices of surveillance and not so much data collections or privacy, which are in the surveillance discourse are just side projects or side discourses, if you like. It will help to actually look at it in a less scandalizing way, more basically, and that's what I, at least, I'm interested in as an anthropologist, to find out what are the basic features of how surveillance works. And I was starting to think, well, how is that compatible with mass surveillance? And I will think about this in a minute, because we heard yesterday from Janina Canales about the subjectivity, and I noted down, is surveillance about intersubjectivity? So I see someone else sees me. So and that would be a social relation. She said no after I answered her. I still think it is a good idea. She didn't theorize it that way, but I had the feeling that there's, at least a path to explore if surveillance about intersubjectivity, the becoming of, being the ego and the alter ego, so to speak, in various other forms. Person to person, person to state, person to organization, organization to state. So they're always, the acceptance and, how do you call it? I missed the English word. Not recommendation. Acknowledgement of the other. That is in surveillance. How does that relate to mass surveillance? Mass surveillance attaches to practices. The NSA just takes everything that runs through the networks. There's lots to be said about the appropriateness of the NSA doing that, of the appropriateness of interfering with those kind of conversations. And I mentioned Helen Nissenbaum yesterday, and the contextual integrity that is badly hurt in these efforts, but nonetheless. So it is, I think it's vital to, or it's worth looking at the surveillance, or at the practices that may become surveillance, or that may be, or that may make it easy for everything that can be called surveillance to attach to it. So new surveillance practices like sneaking in conversations or other that makes it so unseen. So the answer to, or the part of the answer to why is it easy why do so many people give up their data in the first place, cannot be looked at in a rational choice way or routine activity way. It's not because they don't think about the data. They think about things else. They think about their social life. This is what they are doing in many ways, and this is where you can actually attach and can interfere without being, without them knowing it. And to be fair, when interviewing people on loyalty cards or on data protection issues or on life in the digital age, they are not unaware of data protection issues. They're not unaware of it. They're not stupid. But it just doesn't matter in what they are doing, because they talk about data protection issues when we ask them about those, and they have a very clear opinion on them. But also, they are aware that many of the things they wouldn't be able to do if they always think about data protection, always think about the NSA, always think about sneaking in something. They would lose control over their lives in the sense that they see it. They probably have lost control about who is reading what, given the powers of the NSA, but that doesn't really matter for them. What matters is that they can lead their life in a way they want to, and they're aware of that, but they, well, when you ask them, they can't do of a balance. And the balance is, can I lead my life as I want it, or do I have to change everything so radical, or do I have to go on a hill, cut the electricity cord, as someone said in an interview, and live as a hermit, you know, retreated from all the world. And they don't want to do that, so they go on with their lives. And then in their daily routines, they just forget about it. This is what, and this is the final thing, to come to terms. I try to frame this in a way that it's not so much the surveillance of consumption that is important to be looking at. So our digital traces of shopping habits, social network habits, and what have you, but it's actually the consumption of surveillance itself. So we consume the surveillance as part of our lifestyle, as part of our identity, of the status symbols, of the consumerist symbols that we want to be, and surveillance is part of that. Sometimes not really knowing it, sometimes very knowingly. Take all the life logging movement, you know, Apple Watches and little watches that track everything, and you share your running results, or you know, your weight loss online, and that's also part of consumer society. You show off with your data because you want to be recognized, and this is who you are. So there is a consumption of surveillance aspect to that, and this is how I try to frame and come to grips with a theoretical way. And privacy and data protection are parts of that, but they are more sidetracks and not about surveillance in its core. And I stop here.